Welcome back, guys. Here is the video you've been patiently waiting for, the San Francisco breakdown. My wife and I spent a few hours driving around to random waypoints using the full self-driving beta, and I'm going to do my best to convey the overall experience we had in this video. Although there was pretty long drives with no disengagements through some difficult streets, similarly like you saw in the beginning of my last video and what you're watching right now, for example, for the sake of time, I thought it might be better to take a closer look at the disengagements I had during my trip and other moments of interest instead of playing out entire clips with commentary. This way you can get a condensed view of the current performance and also see where it might need some work at a quick glance. There were some truly difficult situations in this trip, and I did have to take over much more frequently than I did driving around a place like Berkeley, for instance. And I do want to mention, if this is your first time watching full self-driving beta content, to please watch some of my other videos as well, and to not use this video to gauge the overall performance. San Francisco is a giant edge case, and I honestly hate driving there. It's very stressful. Before we get started though, I have to tell you guys about something that happened and what it might mean. Andrej Karpathy, an absolute genius who is Senior Director of Artificial Intelligence at Tesla, and is someone you might have seen on my videos before, not only sent out a tweet about the cards I'm giving to my Patreon supporters, but also tagged me and linked my website. You guys, I'm not sure how to break this to you, but this confirmed that I am living in a simulation, which means that you probably are too. On a serious note, I hold Andrej Karpathy in such high regards, I'm seriously fanboying out right now. I called him a genius, and that really doesn't do him justice. Please do some research on him if you're interested in him. I seriously can't believe this happened, and I can't believe how popular this YouTube channel is becoming. Thank you all so much for watching the videos and your support and for making all of this happen. This is truly uncharted territory for me. Also, a huge shout out to the people supporting this channel through Patreon. Quick update, the shot glasses are taking a bit longer to make than we expected, but I assure you we will be requesting shipping addresses soon and getting the first batch of gifts sent out. Thank you so much for supporting my channel. None of this would be possible without you guys, and you really are the reasons I go out and make these videos. Thank you. Before we get into the disengagements, I wanted to first show some areas where I thought the full self-driving beta did particularly well. The next short clip is a great representation of what San Francisco driving is like, and also why it's so difficult for the beta. You can see cars going through the crosswalk even though pedestrians have the right-of-way. Very impolite in other cities, but a regular occurrence here in San Francisco. It's actually expected. You can hear a driver honking at me from behind because it wasn't willing enough to go through this crosswalk. When it finally does start to move, a pedestrian almost steps into the crosswalk. This is an extremely tough situation, even for a human, but I think Autopilot did handle it beautifully. Let's go ahead and watch this back in slow motion. So you can see the pedestrian never actually steps off of the crosswalk, and even though there's another car to the left, Autopilot swerves left to avoid the pedestrian. She was not supposed to be entering the crosswalk at this time. The light was flashing "Don't cross," but stuff like this happens all the time in San Francisco, and it is nice to see Autopilot handle it so well. You might have caught a glimpse of this next clip in the fast-forwarded video I put in the beginning. This is the type of stuff you have to deal with in San Francisco. If Autopilot has nightmares, I'm sure this is the type of stuff they're made of. I think it handled it super well though. You can see it just basically tries to stop dead in the tracks. Also tries to turn away from the guy who was coming directly at us, but sees what's happening, comes down to a complete stop. Like, I can't ask for anything better. I think this handled it perfectly. This is like the edge of edge cases, but I think it did very well. The next thing that impressed me quite a bit was its handling of difficultly marked intersections and weird kind of paint lines. Like, a right turn like this might be easy for humans, debatably, but you have to think about how this looks for a computer. Look how many lines are on the road and crosswalks and this and that. I think Autopilot's getting better and better in every update, handling these oddly painted roads. It doesn't do too well with green yet. There's a lot of green bike lanes in Fremont. It can't do those, but every update, it's able to handle things like this better and better. Here you can see Autopilot doing fairly well in tight quarters. It's not perfect, but it is able to handle it for the most part. Also does a pretty great job stopping for this jogging pedestrian when the view from the left was blocked. What I wanted to show you specifically in this clip, though, is its handling of pedestrians on scooters. Autopilot does not take any risks trying to pass, and instead plays it safe by following them at a distance. Other drivers in San Francisco will be pretty upset with this behavior, but I think this is exactly how a self-driving car should drive through situations like this. Keep in mind, this is not a self-driving car. I am in control of the vehicle 100% of the time. My hands are on the steering wheel, ready to take over in case anything crazy happens. Also, a little bit later in this clip, I'm really not sure if this was a fluke, but you can see Autopilot actually stop dead in the tracks when this emergency vehicle comes by, and it actually says it stopped waiting at a traffic control. So this might be the first indication something like this was built in, but also might be a fluke. The last thing I'm going to compliment Autopilot on before I get into the disengagements is the speed control in places like this where there's a lot of pedestrians around. It does a great job modulating the speed and is driving appropriately for the conditions. This has definitely improved since earlier versions where Autopilot would try to get to the set speed unless there was something in the way. It also seems to do an excellent job at knowing when to pass stationary vehicles versus stopping behind them, but we'll get into more of that later. What you're about to see, though, is a situation that Autopilot could not handle. We have to turn left to get out of here. It is a two-lane street, but there's so many cars parked on the right-hand side that there's literally only room for one car to go down this street at a time. So Autopilot does wait for this car, which was good. It makes the left turn and then gets stuck. There was no way to complete this successfully until we see something like Smart Summon and Autopilot be combined, where Autopilot can start going in reverse. I don't think this is a situation that we're going to see being successful anytime soon. Now let's dive more into the disengagements, starting with pedestrian-related disengagements. A lot of these I really didn't need to take over, but I did out of courtesy. I can tell by the body language of these guys standing in the road that they want to cross, but Autopilot just sees two people standing still on the side of the road. If I didn't disengage, nothing bad would have happened, and it would have been able to do it safely. They would have just had to wait for me to pass by before crossing, like they probably should have anyways. They shouldn't really be crossing in the middle of the street, but let's face it, this is San Francisco. Here's another one that's pretty tough when looking at it from the side of a computer or neural network. We're coming up to a stoplight we need to turn right at, and Autopilot creeps into the intersection to check visibility. I can tell that this person in the wheelchair is waiting to cross the road, but Autopilot just sees a person sitting on the side of the road. As we've seen in some of my other videos, I know for a fact that if he would have made any forward progress towards the crosswalk, Autopilot would have stopped, but it was just a tough situation here. Again, I didn't really need to disengage. In San Francisco, you are expected to go through the intersection when it is safe to do so, but I did disengage out of courtesy. I also did see this truck parked in the middle of the road. They were unloading stuff from it, which I thought would make another great test, so that's what I'll show next. So, as we're approaching the truck, Autopilot starts making its move to go around, but then sees a car coming down the opposite way, and makes a good decision to not pass at this time, and instead decides to wait. It also folded the mirrors, which I always find hilarious. It then has some trouble planning a path around the truck, gets a little bit too close for comfort, and so I did disengage. The crazy thing about this one though, and this seems to happen really frequently, is that as you can see from the projected path, Autopilot was planning the correct path around the truck and then plans a different path that is much closer. It's possible it would have completed the maneuver successfully, but I would have rather it went through its original projected path. I think Autopilot is just lacking a bit of confidence. Here's another similar situation where we have a van stopped off the side of the road and we need to pass. One thing to note here is that although his hazards are on, his left side light is burned out, so he appears to be signaling to the right. I think this may have been why Autopilot had such an issue deciding whether to pass or not here. But again, when we slow things down and take a look at the projected path, we can see that for a few moments Autopilot was making the right decision and was planning on passing. I think we're going to see some major improvements with Autopilot's decision making with every single update. It's obviously very capable of knowing what to do here, it just needs a little push in the right direction. Here's another tough one, where someone is backing up into traffic with absolutely no consideration to the cars around him in true San Francisco fashion. You can see the exact moment I disengaged was the moment Autopilot was going to control for it, which you can see in the visualization by it highlighting it in green and then purple, which signifies a merging vehicle. So I'm sure it would have slammed on the brakes as well. I just didn't feel comfortable letting it get any closer to that truck with what he was doing. And of course, you can't make a full self-driving beta video in San Francisco without testing out Lombard Street, so here you go. I'm going to let these play out ASMR style without any commentary because so many of you have enjoyed that style previously. I hate to break the bad news to you, but unfortunately there were no attempts where I felt comfortable letting the car go all the way down on its own. It was getting a little bit too close for comfort for me. While you're watching this though, just last thing, check out the visualizations and how far it's able to project the path down Lombard Street. This is unbelievable. Please check out my Magic Behind FSD Visualizations video if you haven't seen that already to just see how magical this is. Overall, I think Autopilot did fairly well in San Francisco, but there's definitely some situations where it still struggles. Mostly due to humans and odd circumstances, but that's something the neural networks are going to have to learn and to deal with, and I think it's well on its way to achieving this, especially because the correct decision is usually there in the planned path, but it doesn't always choose the correct one. With every update, this should get better and better though, and I have a feeling we'll also see the steering wheel get less and less jerky as Autopilot becomes more confident in its decision making. Thank you so much for watching. Please like the video if you liked it, and consider subscribing if you would like to see more content like this. Thanks again. Bye.